The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber split open with a sound like thunder rolling across a metal sky. Ambassador Jake Miller walked forward alone, his footsteps echoing in the vast space that could hold 10 football stadiums. Above him, thousands of alien eyes watched from gallery seats carved into living crystal walls that stretched up into darkness. This was the first time any human had stood in the council chambers. Earth had been discovered only 6 months ago by a scout ship that detected radio signals from their little blue planet. The aliens had expected to find primitive creatures barely capable of fire. Instead, they found a species that had already reached the stars. The council's central platform rose from the floor like a mountain made of black glass. 12 massive thrones held the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. The High Chancellor, a creature that looked like liquid metal formed into a vaguely humanoid shape, leaned forward with interest that felt more like a predator studying prey. "Human," the Chancellor's voice boomed through the chamber without any visible mouth moving. "Your species stands accused of harboring enemies of the Galactic Council. You have given shelter to criminals, rebels, and outcasts that we declared unfit for civilized space. How do you answer these charges?" Jake looked up at the 12 judges, each one capable of ordering the destruction of entire star systems. His hand stayed steady at his sides. He had been chosen for this moment not because he was the best diplomat Earth had, but because he was the only one who had actually met the people the Council called criminals. "Your Honor," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "I think there's been a misunderstanding about what we've been doing." A ripple of movement went through the alien galleries. Several council members shifted in their thrones. The Draknari representative, a being that looked like an insect the size of a small building, clicked its mandibles in what might have been amusement or annoyance. "Explain," ordered Council Member Vix, whose crystalline body refracted light into painful rainbows. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. Immediately, every weapon in the chamber locked onto him. Energy shields flared to life around the council thrones. Security drones dropped from hidden alcoves like metallic wasps. "Easy," Jake said, holding the device where everyone could see it. "It's just a holographic projector. I want to show you something." The Chancellor made a gesture and the weapons powered down slightly. "Proceed, but know that any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction." Jake activated the device. Above the chamber floor, a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, showing thousands of star systems connected by trade routes and communication networks. But on the edges, in the dark spaces between the spiral arms, dozens of systems glowed with a different color. "These are the exile worlds," Jake said, pointing to the distant lights. "Places where you send species that don't fit your definition of civilized. The Korthan, who developed medicine you considered too advanced. The Zilani, whose art you found disturbing. The Bex Collective, who asked too many questions about council authority." The hologram zoomed in on one of the exile systems, showing a barren world with massive storms and toxic atmosphere. "This is Cathara 9, where you sent the Meleks after they refused to give up their children for your genetic experiments. When we found them, they were dying of radiation poisoning in caves barely deep enough to shelter their young." A murmur went through the galleries. Some council members leaned forward with interest. Others sat back as if trying to distance themselves from the images. "The Meleks are extinct," said Council Member Thane, a being whose body seemed to be made of living shadow. "They died from exposure to dangerous stellar radiation after their relocation to a more suitable environment." Jake smiled, and somehow that expression made several council members step back despite the distance between them. "Actually, they're very much alive. Would you like to meet them?" Before anyone could respond, new lights appeared on the holographic display. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Council's home system, dozens of them. Then hundreds, their energy signatures unlike anything in the Council's databases. "Impossible," breathed the Chancellor. "Our defensive perimeter should have detected any approaching fleet days ago." "It would have," Jake agreed, "if they were using technology you recognize. But when you exile entire species for being too advanced, they tend to keep developing new things. The Meleks figured out how to fold space-time around their ships. The Korthan developed medical nanobots that can repair damage faster than your weapons can cause it. The Bex learned to ask the right questions about the nature of reality itself. The chamber's emergency alarms began to sound as more ships appeared on the tactical displays. Energy readings climbed beyond anything the Council's instruments could measure. Defense stations that had protected the galactic capital for 1,000 years suddenly registered massive power fluctuations in their systems. "What do you want?" the Chancellor demanded, his liquid metal form shifting between shapes as stress affected his molecular cohesion. Jake looked around the chamber at the thousands of aliens watching from the galleries, then back at the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy, who suddenly looked very small on their massive thrones. "We want to have a conversation," he said simply, "about what happens when you throw away the best and brightest minds in the galaxy just because they make you uncomfortable. About what those minds can accomplish when someone gives them a chance to thrive instead of just survive." The holographic display shifted again, showing not weapons or threats, but cities. Massive space stations where dozens of different species lived and worked together. Research facilities where exiled scientists had made discoveries that would revolutionize galactic civilization. Schools where children from 100 different worlds learned from each other's cultures. "This is what we've built," Jake continued. "Not an empire or a rebellion. A community. A place where being different isn't a crime and asking questions isn't treason." Council member Vix's crystalline form flickered with rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. "These species were exiled for good reason. They threatened the stability of galactic civilization." "They threatened your control," Jake corrected. "There's a difference. And now they want to come home." The silence that followed was broken by a new voice transmitted directly through the chamber's communication systems. It spoke in harmonics that touched the mind rather than the ears, the telepathic language of the Bex Collective. "Council members," the voice said, carrying undertones of sadness and hope, "we have not come for revenge. We have come for justice, not just for ourselves, but for every species yet to be born, who might one day stand where we stood." The great chamber fell completely silent as the full implications of what they were seeing began to sink in. The exiled species had not just survived, they had thrived, and they had found an ally in humanity. A species whose only crime was believing that everyone deserved a second chance. Jake looked up at the council one more time, his expression calm but determined. "We made them a promise when we found them dying on your exile worlds. We told them that no one would hurt them again. Today we're here to keep that promise." 3 weeks before Ambassador Jake Miller would stand trial before the Galactic Council, Captain Lisa Carter guided her rescue ship through the toxic storm surrounding the planet Gorath 5. Her navigation display showed radiation levels that would kill most known species within hours, but her ship's experimental shielding held steady against the poisonous winds. "Contact ahead," reported her science officer, Tom Bradley, his instruments detecting faint life signs through the interference. "Looks like they're holed up in some kind of underground facility. Energy output is minimal, but there are definitely survivors down there." Lisa checked her mission files one more time. The Rothan had been exiled to Gorath 5 15 years ago for developing biotechnology that the Council deemed too dangerous. Their crime had been creating medical treatments that could extend life far beyond what the Council considered natural. The punishment was banishment to a world where that extended life would be cut short by environmental hazards. "Take us down," Lisa ordered, "and prep the medical bay. Something tells me we're going to need every healing chamber we have." The ship descended through layers of corrosive atmosphere that would have eaten through most hulls in minutes. Human engineering, combined with shield technology borrowed from 3 different exiled species, made the impossible landing routine. They touched down near a series of caves that showed signs of artificial expansion. Lisa led the rescue team into the underground complex, their environmental suits protecting them from air that was literally poison. The corridors they found had been carved by claws rather than tools, widened over years of desperate excavation. Emergency lighting flickered weakly from panels that had been jury-rigged to run far longer than their designers ever intended. They found the Rothan in the deepest chamber, gathered around a crude medical facility that somehow kept 37 beings alive despite having equipment meant for maybe 10. The survivors looked up as the humans entered, their large eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Please," said the eldest Rothan, her voice weak but clear through the translation device. "We have children here. They have never breathed clean air or seen natural sunlight. If you are here to finish what the Council started, I beg you to take them first. Let them die quickly." Lisa pulled off her helmet, ignoring Tom's sharp intake of breath as she exposed herself to the contaminated air. Her enhanced immune system, boosted by medical technology from 6 different species, could handle the toxins for a short time. The gesture was worth the risk when she saw the Rothan's expressions change from despair to amazement. "We're not here to hurt anyone," Lisa said gently. "We're here to take you home." The eldest Rothan stared at her with confusion. "Home? But our homeworld was declared forbidden to us. The council said we could never return." "The council doesn't speak for us," Lisa replied, replacing her helmet and activating her communicator. "This is Carter to Fleet Command. 37 survivors, multiple critical cases. Request immediate evacuation to New Geneva Colony." Within an hour, larger ships arrived carrying medical teams and transport vessels. Human doctors worked alongside Melix healers and Korthan medical specialists, their combined knowledge saving lives that the council had written off years ago. Children who had been born in caves saw their first clean sky through the windows of rescue ships. As the evacuation proceeded, the eldest Rothan, who introduced herself as healer Kira, pulled Lisa aside. "Why do you do this? What do you gain from saving exiles and outcasts?" Lisa looked out at the rescue operation, watching humans and aliens work together to load medical equipment that would have been considered impossible just decades ago. "We were alone once too," she said, "stuck on one small planet, convinced we were the only intelligent life in the universe. When we finally reached the stars and found out about all the wonderful species out there, we also learned how many had been thrown away." "So you rescue us out of sympathy?" Kira asked. "We rescue you because you're valuable," Lisa corrected. "Your people developed medical treatments that could help billions. The Melix create art that touches the soul in ways we never imagined. The Becks ask questions that push the boundaries of science itself. The Council saw threats to their control. We see opportunities to make the galaxy better." Kira was quiet for a long moment, watching her people board ships that would take them to safety. "And what do you ask in return?" "Nothing," Lisa said simply. "Except that when you're ready, you help us find others who need saving." The last transport ship lifted off from Gorath 5, leaving behind only empty caves and the toxic winds that had been a death sentence for so many. But as they departed, Tom's sensors detected something unexpected. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures from the abandoned research facility," he reported. "Looks like the Rothan left something behind." Kira's expression grew thoughtful. "We had to leave our most advanced equipment behind. Medical synthesizers that could create custom treatments for any species. Genetic repair systems that could undo radiation damage. Longevity treatments that could extend healthy life by centuries." "Why didn't you use them?" Lisa asked. "Because they require specific genetic codes to operate," Kira explained. "We programmed them to only work for beings who carry markers from multiple species." "We thought such beings would never exist," Lisa smiled, thinking of the medical teams aboard their ships where humans worked with enhanced biology, borrowed from dozens of species, their genes carefully modified to be compatible with alien healing technologies. "I think you might be surprised." 3 hours later, human medical teams had successfully activated equipment that the Council had declared too dangerous to exist. The synthesizers hummed to life, beginning to produce treatments that could heal genetic damage across species barriers. The longevity systems activated dormant programs that could extend healthy life far beyond what anyone thought possible. "How is this possible?" Kira breathed, watching her life's work function again after 15 years of abandonment. "Because we're not just humans anymore," Lisa explained. "We're human plus. We've integrated genetic markers, immune systems, and biological enhancements from every species we've helped, not to replace what we are but to expand it. Your equipment recognizes us as something new, something that the Council never imagined could exist." As their fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying the Rothan to safety and their medical equipment to human research stations, Lisa received an encrypted message from Ambassador Miller. The Council had issued an ultimatum. Humanity had 30 days to surrender all exiled species and submit to Council authority, or face the consequences. Lisa looked at the data displays showing the enhanced medical capabilities they had just acquired, technology that could revolutionize healing across the galaxy. She thought about the 37 Rothan who would see their grandchildren grow up because someone had cared enough to find them. She considered the growing alliance of exiled species who were sharing their knowledge freely because they had found a place where they belonged. "Tom, send a message to Admiral Thompson," she ordered. "Tell him the Rothan are safe, their technology is secure, and we're ready for whatever comes next." And if the council demands we stand down? Tom asked. Lisa smiled, the same expression that would soon make the most powerful beings in the galaxy very nervous. Tell them we made a promise, and humans always keep their promises. The silence in the council chamber lasted exactly 37 seconds. Ambassador Jake Miller counted each one as he watched the most powerful beings in the galaxy process what they were seeing. Outside the massive viewing windows, human ships maintained formation alongside vessels that should not have existed. Ships built by species the Council had declared extinct, powered by technologies they had deemed too dangerous, crewed by people they had written off as acceptable losses. High Chancellor Mort broke the silence first, his liquid metal form rippling with agitation. This is impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected any significant technological development among the exile populations. Your intelligence networks, Jake replied calmly, have been compromised for the better part of 3 decades. The Bex Collective learned to hide their communications in the quantum fluctuations of empty space. The Corthan developed medical nanobots that could infiltrate your sensor networks and feed them false data. The Zilani created art so beautiful that your agents forgot to file their reports. Council member Vix's crystalline body flashed through a spectrum of angry colors. These claims are absurd. No exiled species would possess the resources or knowledge to develop such capabilities. Jake gestured, and his holographic display shifted to show detailed technical schematics. You're right. No single exiled species could do it alone, but when you put brilliant minds together and give them a common cause, interesting things happen. The schematics revealed ship designs that combined technologies from dozens of different species. Corthan medical systems integrated with Beck's quantum communication arrays. Melek's artistic principles applied to Rothan biotechnology. Zilani cultural innovations merged with human engineering approaches. Each individual component might have been familiar to the Council, but the combinations created possibilities that none of them had imagined. Show them the new Geneva system, came a voice through the chamber's communication array. Admiral Rebecca Stone's face appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the bridge of a ship that registered on sensors as impossibly large and impossibly advanced. The holographic display expanded to show a star system that defied everything the Council knew about planetary engineering. Worlds that had been terraformed using techniques that combined the atmospheric knowledge of 6 different species. Space stations that served as research. Centers where beings from dozens of civilizations worked together on projects that pushed the boundaries of known science. This is the new Geneva colony, Admiral Stone continued, built in a system that your own surveys marked as uninhabitable. The Rothan provided biotechnology that could adapt any species to new environments. The Corthan supplied medical enhancements that could help beings survive in conditions that would normally kill them. The Meleks contributed healing techniques that could repair genetic damage caused by hostile environments. Impossible, whispered Council Member Thane, his shadow form flickering with disbelief. The genetic barriers between species cannot be overcome. It's a fundamental law of biology. It was, Jake agreed, until the Rothan developed universal genetic adaptation protocols. The Corthan created cross-species medical interfaces, and humans provided the crazy idea that maybe the laws of biology were more like guidelines. The chamber's emergency systems activated as more ships appeared on the tactical displays. Each new arrival brought energy signatures that made the Council's own defensive systems look primitive. Weapon systems that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Shields that could redirect energy attacks back at their sources. Propulsion systems that seemed to ignore the normal limitations of physics. What do you want? Chancellor Mort demanded, his form now shifting rapidly between different configurations as stress affected his molecular stability. We want to talk, Jake said simply, about the 17 billion beings who have died on exile worlds because the Council decided they were inconvenient. About the children who never got to see their homeworlds because their parents asked the wrong questions or developed the wrong technologies. The holographic display shifted again, showing not technical schematics or star charts but faces, thousands of them, representing every species that had been exiled over the past 2 centuries. Children who had died from preventable diseases. Scientists whose discoveries could have revolutionized galactic civilization. Artists whose work could have brought beauty to billions of lives. These are the people you threw away, Jake continued. These are the minds you decided were too dangerous to exist. These are the cultures you erased because they didn't fit your definition of acceptable civilization. Council member Dracon, whose insectoid form had remained motionless throughout the presentation, finally spoke. The exile protocols exist to maintain galactic stability. Some technologies, some ideas are simply too dangerous to allow unrestricted development. Dangerous to whom? Jake asked. The Corthan medical advances could have eliminated genetic diseases across the galaxy. The Rothan biotechnology could have allowed any species to colonize any world. The Bex Collective's questions could have led to fundamental breakthroughs in our understanding of reality itself. Dangerous to the established order, Dracon admitted. Some developments threaten the stability that has kept the galaxy peaceful for millennia. Peaceful for whom? Came a new voice through the communication array. The speaker identified herself as Elder Kira of the Rothan, her words carrying the weight of 15 years spent watching her people die in toxic caves. Peaceful for the species that conform to your standards, not so peaceful for those of us who dared to think differently. More voices joined the conversation, survivors from a dozen different exile worlds, their testimonies creating a chorus of accusation that echoed through the chamber. They spoke of children born in exile who never lived to see their first birthday. They described watching their homeworlds disappear behind them, as council ships carried them to distant death worlds. They told of cultures that had been erased from official records as if they had never existed at all. Enough, Chancellor Mort finally said, his voice carrying harmonics of pain. What's done is done. The past cannot be changed? No, Jake agreed. But the future can be, and that's why we're here. The chamber's massive doors began to open, their mechanisms groaning under the weight of metal and crystal that had been designed to keep the galaxy's most dangerous beings contained. Through the opening came a procession that made several council members step back despite the distance involved. They were the survivors, representatives from every species that had been exiled, banished, or declared extinct by the council. They bore the scars of their exile, radiation burns that had been healed but left marks, prosthetic limbs that replaced parts lost to hostile environments, eyes that had seen too much suffering. But they also carried themselves with dignity that no amount of hardship could break. At their head walked a human woman, whose presence somehow commanded attention, despite her modest appearance. Dr. Maria Santos, the head of the Human Exile Alliance, had spent the last 20 years coordinating rescue missions to forgotten worlds. Her hair showed silver streaks from radiation exposure, and her left arm bore a prosthetic that combined human engineering with Corthan medical technology. Council members, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. We have not come for revenge. We have come for justice, not just for those who have already suffered, but for every species yet to be born who might one day stand where we stood. She gestured, and the holographic display changed one final time. Instead of weapons or threats, it showed something that made even the most hardened council members pause in wonder. It was a vision of the galaxy as it could be. Worlds where dozens of species lived together in harmony, sharing technologies and cultures that created something greater than the sum of their parts. Research stations where the greatest minds of the galaxy worked together to solve problems that no single species could tackle alone. A civilization built not on fear and control, but on cooperation and mutual respect. This is what we offer, Dr. Santos continued. Not conquest, but partnership. Not revenge, but redemption. The chance to build something better than what came before. The great chamber fell silent as the council members absorbed the magnitude of what they were seeing. Around them, the combined fleets of 100 species held position, their weapons powered but not targeted, their presence a reminder that the galaxy's discarded peoples were no longer defenseless. And if we refuse? Chancellor Mort asked quietly. Jake looked directly into the Chancellor's shifting form, his expression calm but resolute. Then you'll learn what happens when humanity keeps its promises. We told every exile we found the same thing. No one hurts you again. That's not a threat, Your Honor. It's a guarantee. The Council's private session chamber was smaller than the main hall, but no less imposing. 12 alcoves held the galaxy's most powerful beings as they huddled in emergency consultation. For the first time in over 3 centuries, the Galactic Council faced a challenge they could not simply exile to a distant world. The situation is untenable, declared Council Member Vix, her crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. Our military analysts estimate that a direct confrontation with the exile fleet would result in catastrophic losses. Their technology appears to be decades ahead of our own capabilities. Chancellor Mort's liquid form rippled as he processed tactical data from the fleet positioning around their home system. How did we fail to detect this level of technological advancement? Our intelligence networks reported that the exile populations were struggling to survive on the designated worlds. Because we saw what we wanted to see, admitted Council Member Thane. His shadow formed darker than usual. Every report confirmed that the exiles were suffering, dying, barely clinging to existence. We never considered that suffering might motivate them to achieve what comfort could not. Intelligence Director Quinn materialized in the center of the chamber, her species' natural phase-shifting ability, allowing her to appear without using the formal entry protocols. My analysis suggests that the humans have been systematically collecting exiled species for at least 30 years. They have created a network of hidden colonies, research stations, and manufacturing facilities that exist entirely outside our monitoring systems. How is that possible? Demanded Councilmember Draken, his insectoid mandibles clicking with agitation. We monitor every hyperspace route, every communication channel, every energy signature in the galaxy. Director Quinn's form solidified completely, a sign of extreme stress among her people. The Bex Collective developed communication methods that exist outside normal spacetime. The Korthan created medical nanobots that could infiltrate our systems and alter sensor data. The Zilani used their artistic abilities to create cultural blind spots that made our agents overlook obvious signs. And the humans tied it all together with an organizational structure that no single species could have created. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For over 2 centuries, the Council had maintained control through information superiority and technological advantage. Now they faced an alliance that had surpassed them in both areas. What do they actually want? Asked Council Member Wrath, whose massive crystalline form had remained silent until now. The human ambassador spoke of justice and cooperation. But what are their concrete demands? Chancellor Mort activated a holographic display showing the document that had been transmitted from the human flagship. They want formal recognition of the Exile Alliance as a sovereign political entity. They demand reparations for damages caused by the exile protocols. They insist on the right to offer sanctuary to any species that requests it. And they want seats on the Council itself. Absolutely unacceptable, declared Council Member Vix. The exile protocols exist for good reason. Some technologies, some ideologies are simply too dangerous to allow unrestricted development. And yet, observed Council Member Thane, their technological achievements suggest that restriction may actually have accelerated dangerous development rather than preventing it. Desperation is a powerful motivator for innovation. Director Quinn expanded the holographic display to show detailed intelligence reports. Our analysis indicates that the Exile Alliance has developed weapons systems capable of destabilizing star systems, medical technology that could render entire species immune to conventional biological warfare, and communication networks that could coordinate instantaneous galaxy-wide resistance movements. In other words, Chancellor Mort said slowly, they have become exactly what we feared they might become, but infinitely more dangerous because we forced them to develop these capabilities in secret. There is another factor to consider, added Council Member Wrath. Public opinion within our own member species. Word of the Exile Alliance's survival is already spreading through unofficial channels. Many of our citizens are beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the true fate of the exiled populations. Questions that we have been answering with carefully worded reassurances for 2 centuries, acknowledged Council Member Dracon. If the truth about the exile worlds becomes widely known, we will face internal rebellions long before any external threat becomes critical. Chancellor Mort's form stabilized into something resembling his formal configuration. What options do we have? Our military forces cannot guarantee victory against their technological advantages. Our intelligence networks have been compromised. Our political authority is threatened by the potential exposure of the exile protocols. We could attempt to negotiate, suggested Council Member Thane. Their stated goals do not necessarily require the complete dissolution of the Council. Perhaps some form of shared authority could be arranged. Shared authority with criminals and outcasts? Council Member Vix's crystalline form flared with indignant energy. The exile protocols exist because these species and their technologies represent fundamental threats to galactic stability. And yet, pointed out Council Member Rath, their alliance appears to be remarkably stable, despite including species that we considered incompatible. Perhaps our understanding of what constitutes a threat needs to be reconsidered. The debate was interrupted by an emergency communication from the Council's defense coordinator. Chancellor, we have a priority alert from the perimeter monitoring stations. Additional fleets are arriving in system. Energy signatures match those of the Exile Alliance, but the ships are unlike anything in our databases. How many ships? Chancellor Mort asked, though his tone suggested he dreaded the answer. Conservative estimate places the count at over 3,000 vessels, with energy outputs that exceed our measurement capabilities. They appear to be maintaining a defensive formation, but their mere presence is causing cascading failures in our sensor networks. Director Quinn's form began to phase in and out of visibility, a stress response that indicated her species was approaching panic levels. Chancellor, I'm receiving reports from intelligence assets throughout the galaxy. Similar fleets are appearing in every major system. This isn't just about our home system anymore. They have positioned forces to simultaneously threaten every significant council installation in the galaxy. A coordinated strategic deployment on this scale, whispered Council Member Draken, would require years of planning and preparation. They have been preparing for this confrontation far longer than we realized. Chancellor Mort's form began to lose cohesion as the stress affected his molecular stability. How did we miss this? How did 30 years of intelligence gathering fail to detect a military operation of this magnitude? Because we were looking for threats, Council Member Thane said quietly. We were monitoring for rebellion, for revolution, for conquest. We never considered that they might simply be preparing to come home. The Chamber's communication system activated, displaying Ambassador Jake Miller's calm face on the central screen. Council members, I believe you have had sufficient time to review our proposal. We would like to continue our discussion, but this time with the understanding that the age of exile is ending. One way or another, the choice, Jake continued, is whether it ends with cooperation or with consequences. We prefer cooperation, but we're prepared for either outcome. The transmission ended, leaving the council members alone with the weight of a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Outside their chambers, 3,000 ships waited patiently for an answer, their crews representing every species that had ever been told they didn't belong. Chancellor Mort looked around at his fellow council members, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their alien features. The exile protocols were designed to maintain stability by removing threats. Instead, we appear to have created the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. Or, suggested Council Member Rath, we may have created the greatest opportunity the galaxy has ever seen. The question is whether we are wise enough to recognize the difference. 1 year after the confrontation at the Galactic Core, Ambassador Jake Miller walked through the corridors of Unity Station, the galaxy's new diplomatic center. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining architectural principles from dozens of species into something that somehow felt both alien and familiar to everyone who visited. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see the construction of New Geneva City, a massive space habitat that would house representatives from every known species. The city's design incorporated living spaces for beings who breathed methane alongside those who needed water, gravity sections that could accommodate everything from tiny flying creatures to massive crystalline entities, and cultural centers where the art and music of 100 civilizations could be shared. The negotiations had lasted 6 months. The old council had eventually agreed to a complete restructuring of galactic governance, though not without significant resistance. 3 of the original 12 members had resigned rather than participate in what they called the surrender to chaos. 2 others had been removed by their own governments when the full truth about the exile protocols became public knowledge. The new Galactic Assembly was larger, messier, and infinitely more complex than the old council. Representatives from 847 different species now participated in galactic governance, including dozens that the old regime had declared extinct. The assembly chambers were chaotic, multilingual affairs, where debates could last for days as translators worked to bridge not just language barriers but fundamental differences in how different species perceived reality itself. Jake's destination was the Memorial Gardens, a vast space at the station's heart, where representatives from every exiled species had planted something from their homeworlds. The garden should have been impossible, with plants that required different atmospheres, gravities, and stellar radiation somehow thriving together under carefully maintained environmental fields. Waiting for him among the impossible flowers was Elder Kira, the Rothan healer whose people had been among the first rescued from the exile worlds. Her scales now showed the silver patterns that indicated advanced age among her people, but her eyes held a peace that had been absent during their first meeting in the toxic caves of Gorath 5. The Valan delegation has agreed to the protection protocols, she reported, settling onto a bench designed to accommodate a dozen different body types. They're the last of the neutral systems to join the alliance. Jake nodded, reviewing the data on his tablet. The Valan were a peaceful aquatic species whose homeworld sat on a strategically valuable hyperspace junction. Their agreement to accept alliance protection meant that the old council's ability to simply relocate inconvenient species was effectively ended. Admiral Stone reports that the last of the exile worlds have been fully evacuated, Kira continued. The memorial beacons are in place. Those beacons would ensure that the graveyard planets were never forgotten. Quantum transmitters that would broadcast the names of the dead across the galaxy for the next 10,000 years. A reminder of the cost of abandoning the vulnerable. There's something else, Kira said quietly. The Nethys have made contact. Jake looked up sharply. The Nethys were legendary, an ancient species that had supposedly vanished from the galaxy millennia ago, rather than submit to the original council's authority. Most scholars considered them a myth. They're real, Kira confirmed. And they've been watching. They want to meet with you. Before Jake could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. It spoke directly into their minds with the gentle touch that marked an experienced Bex telepath. They're here now, announced Mindspeaker Veltar, his physical form materializing from between the memorial plants where he had been communing with their alien biochemistries. They've been observing our progress for some time. The air itself seemed to shift, and suddenly 3 figures stood among the memorial plants. They were beings of pure energy wearing forms that seemed more like suggestions than solid matter. Their leader, if such terms applied, stepped forward with movements that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. We are the Nethys. The being communicated through harmonics that resonated in multiple dimensions. We withdrew from this galaxy when the Council chose dominion over wisdom. We have watched as species after species was broken or banished for the crime of difference. Jake felt the weight of eons in that voice. The sadness of beings who had seen their hopes for galactic civilization repeatedly crushed. But now, the Nethys continued, its form shifting to become more recognizably humanoid in apparent respect for their communication preferences. We see something new. A species that collects the broken rather than breaking them further. One that builds strength through inclusion rather than exclusion. Kira's scales shimmered with colors that had no name in human language but conveyed joy beyond measure. Mindspeaker Veltar's telepathic signature radiated with wonder that touched every sensitive being on the station. We would like to rejoin the galaxy, the Nethys said simply, if the Alliance will have us. Jake smiled, the same expression that had once struck fear into the hearts of council members but now carried only warmth and welcome. The Alliance has always been built on a simple principle, he said, gesturing to the impossible garden around them where creatures from 100 worlds somehow found ways to thrive together. Everyone belongs somewhere. Everyone has value. Everyone deserves protection. He extended his hand in the ancient human gesture of greeting, and after a moment's hesitation, the Nethys reached out with a construct of pure energy that somehow felt perfectly solid and warm. No one hurts you again, Jake said quietly, speaking the words that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy's lost and broken peoples. Welcome home. Above them, through the station's transparent dome, the combined fleets of 100 species maintained their eternal patrol. Not as conquerors or enforcers, but as guardians. They watched over a galaxy that had finally learned the difference between unity and uniformity, between strength and oppression. In the depths of space, new worlds bloomed with impossible combinations of life. Children of species that had never met before played games that blended their cultures into something entirely new. Scientists from dozens of civilizations worked together on projects that pushed the boundaries of knowledge itself. Artists collaborated on works that touched souls across the spectrum of consciousness. And somewhere among the stars, other exiled peoples saw the Alliance's signals and began the long journey home. The age of exile was ending, replaced by something that the galaxy had lost millennia ago, and was only now rediscovering. Hope. Captain Lisa Carter stood on the observation deck of her newest ship, watching a convoy of vessels approach the New Geneva system. These weren't refugees fleeing death worlds or outcasts hiding from persecution. These were volunteers, representatives from species that had heard about the Alliance and wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. Her communications officer, a young Bex Collective member whose telepathic abilities had been enhanced rather than feared, looked up from his station. "Captain, we're receiving requests for sanctuary from 17 different systems. All of them report that their local governments are pressuring them to conform to outdated standards." Lisa nodded, consulting the manifest of ships being prepared for rescue operations. Each vessel was crewed by mixed species teams, their different abilities combining to create capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. "Send them coordinates for the sanctuary worlds, and let them know what we tell everyone who comes to us." "Yes, Captain. No one hurts you again." The promise that had started with one species reaching out to help the forgotten and abandoned had become something larger. It was no longer just humanity's promise. It was the galaxy's promise to itself, a commitment that no one would be left behind simply for being different. As the rescue ships departed for their missions, Jake Miller stood in the memorial gardens and watched new flowers bloom among the plants from 1,000 worlds. Each one represented a species that had found a home, a culture that had been preserved, a people who had been told they mattered. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was no longer full of outcasts. Humanity had kept its promise and, in doing so, had helped the galaxy remember what it meant to truly be civilized. In a universe that had forgotten how to care for its most vulnerable, they had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you choose to protect.